20th Century Fox proudly presents the return engagement of The Sound of Music. This is Steve Gray reporting from Hollywood, where our first guest is the star of The Sound of Music, Julie Andrews. Julie, I interviewed you 8 years ago for The Sound of Music. Could you review with us, how did you get the part?
Do you know, it's something that I'm not too sure about myself. I had completed the film of Mary Poppins, and I had completed the film of the Americanization of Emily, but they had not been released. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that I had finished also The Sound of Music before any of the films were released. Just about all those things coincided. As I finished The Sound of Music, so Mary Poppins was just about to open. I guess the word of mouth had spread a little bit about Poppins, and the first thing I knew about it was, I think, Robert Wise approached me and asked me if I would be interested in doing it.
Julie, can you tell us something about the story that embraces all of the unforgettable music?
It's the story of a young novice in Salzburg, Austria, who is full of life and doesn't really fit into the convent. She's always getting into trouble, and she's always doing things she isn't supposed to do. She's a problem, but she would like to become a nun, and she's very devout and she's very good, but the Mother Superior thinks she should send her out for a little while into the big world to decide for herself whether becoming a nun it was really what she wanted most in life. And so she was sent to take care of 7 children. Captain von Trapp and his 7 children lived in a beautiful villa. She adored the children, and against her wishes, I think, almost fell in love with the captain, and he with her. It's really how they finally confess their love and get married, and how she educates the children and gets them to love her as much as she loves them, and everybody lives happily ever after. The war is threatening. It's a true story. There really was a Maria von Trapp and her husband, and they eventually did escape from the Germans, as they do in the film, and they did come to America.
Who are your co-stars, Julie?
Christopher Plummer, Eleanor Parker, Peggy Wood, Richard Haydn, and 7 wonderful children. And they were adorable too. They were lovely to work with.
It's hard to forget just how uplifting a film it is.
It really is a kind of marvelous commercial for life, or a plea for life, if you want it. Everybody in it was, as you say, very up in their spirits, and it is a joyful film. I agree with you. You look at it and say it's the way I'd like to be if I could, maybe, out in the open air and not too many troubles.
The Austrian Alps help support that mood, I think, and Robert Wise picked the perfect location when he shot in Salzburg, that's for sure.
Our main intention when we all made it was to make it as real as possible, and it was Bob's idea to get it out in the open, to really use the scenery and make it like another star of the picture, turn it to our advantage, and it really worked. The thing that I find amazing is that I'm sure the Sound of Music has sent more unsuspecting tourists to Salzburg, because everybody went there, and I believe there is a Sound of Music tour shown in Salzburg now just because the film was successful. But what I don't think anybody knew was that it rains an awful lot there, and I don't mean to spoil the tourist trade, but if they only knew how long we waited to get some of the sunny scenes in the film, most of the time, behind the camera we were all wrapped up in plastic Macintoshes and umbrellas and galoshes, and only took them all off to shoot a quick scene.
You think you'll ever make another picture like The Sound of Music, Julie?
Well, I think it would be foolish to try and find something like The Sound of Music, because that's, one of a kind. But something as joyful as that would be lovely. I would love to find something like that. I don't think that musicals on that scale are being made very much anymore. The budget would be too high now, and it's kind of sad, I think.
In its first release, The Sound of Music became the biggest hit of all time, and I think now it's been surpassed only by The Godfather.
Although everybody's seen it, the amazing thing about it is that so many people have seen it so many times. It isn't just that the people have seen it once. Many people that have seen it 3 and 4 times, and some that have seen it 7 and 8, and some that have seen it like 60 times.
What about those who haven't seen it at all, Julie? Today's younger generation. Do you think they're going to like The Sound of Music?
I hope so very much. I think that there must be a need for this kind of picture always, especially with young people.
And joining us today is Oscar-winning producer and director of The Sound of Music, Robert Wise. Bob, did you have any idea that The Sound of Music would be as phenomenally successful as it's been?
We had no idea that we would have that. You'd have to have the most supreme ego in the world to ever think at the time you made a film that was going to gross over $100 million. I don't think you just don't know it, We felt that we were making a good piece of work and that we could be successful and popular, and we certainly felt, after we'd had 2 marvelous sneak previews back in the Midwest, we certainly felt we had a very, very good potential for a good money-making film. But none of us had any idea it would do what it's done.
What do you think are the ingredients that helped make it so successful? It had already done very well on Broadway.
Yes, it did. It was actually, on the record, I believe it was the most successful of all the Rodgers and Hammerstein stage music, not just in New York, but on the road. And the road companies and the bus and truck companies, they said that that was their most popular and their most successful show. So it had those marvelous ingredients for an audience. And then I think we were very fortunate, let's say, in some of the ingredients we got together. I think our casting Julie to start with. I think Julie was a marvelous stroke for us. I think our choice to go on location in the spot it took place and getting all the wonderful backgrounds of Salzburg, was a tremendous attribute to the show. And then I think the marvelous story and the lovely score just all came together at a time. And here's the other ingredient that I've always felt has been very important to the success of The Sound of Music, and that was its timing. This is something we don't really control very much in terms of films. Actually, The Sound of Music had been owned by Fox for several years without being made. Finally, it was made at the time we did in '64, and it came out seemingly at a time when there was just a real hunger for this kind of story material.
When you screened the film for the studio, did you worry about what the executives were thinking?
No, I didn't really. I thought they could make up their own mind, and I just calmly reached under my seat and knocked wood a little bit. I'm a very superstitious fellow, you see. It looks pretty good, knock wood. But there was never any question, as far as I was concerned, with the studio from the beginning on The Sound of Music. We shot for the first 10 or 12 weeks on it in Austria, and the film was being sent back here to be processed, so they actually saw the dailies here in Hollywood, our each day's work from the laboratory before we did, and I kept getting nothing but glowing wires from them as they would see it.
What excites you about the filmmaking process?
I think it's really the excitement of whatever the subject is at hand and the scene is at hand, really doing it well and having it come off and having your actors come up with marvelous performances and just having it work and having it get in the cutting room and go together and be the way you hoped it would and sometimes better. I think it's the whole amalgam of these elements that excite me.
Thank you, Bob and Julie, for being here today, and may I wish you both luck as The Sound of Music is released again. Ladies and gentlemen, 20th Century Fox has just reissued The Sound of Music starring Julie Andrews and produced and directed by Robert Wise. The screen version of the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical sensation is the winner of 5 Academy Awards. This is Steve Gray in Hollywood urging you to see again The Sound of Music.